Good morning. My name is Matt Levine. I'm the VP West Coast with Kingpin Communications. Welcome to Preparing for a Cookieless Future, everything B2B marketers need to know. We have a fantastic webinar planned for today. It will be broken down into two parts. The first part, I will set the stage as to why we are having this conversation. And the second part will be a panel discussion with our industry experts. They will separate fact from fiction, discuss the impact these changes will have, and best practices to help you future-proof your strategies. It is my pleasure to welcome Harish Munagala, Director of Marketing Operations from Quest Software. Harish is a seasoned marketing leader with 10+ years experience as an advisor to the executive leadership in campaign planning, execution, and continuous improvement with the help of data-driven insights. He is specialized in marketing operations, advanced analytics, marketing operations, CRM platforms, and digital marketing. Before joining Quest, Harish had several leadership roles at Dell, ADP, ClearResult, and DevilHorn. Welcome, Harish. Next up, we have Haley Hunter, account manager with Google. Haley has spent her career in the digital marketing and advertising space and has been an account manager at Google for the last 3 years, managing a portfolio of over 50 SME Google partners. She works with clients across multiple verticals to understand growth drivers, identify opportunities, as well as changes in the market, and helps partners create multi-quarter plans to achieve their marketing objectives. Welcome, Haley. And finally, we have Andre Yi, founder and CEO of Triblio. Prior to Triblio, he was the SVP product development for Eloqua. He was part of the executive management team that led Eloqua to an IPO and eventual billion-dollar exit to Oracle. He is a leading voice in ABM and regularly speaks on topics related to ABM and emerging marketing technology. Welcome, Andre. We will be talking to them shortly during the panel discussion. For those of you not familiar with Kingpin Communications, we are a global B2B digital marketing agency with offices in San Francisco, New York, and London. We provide actionable intelligence and measurable results for B2B brands across all addressable media channels. In setting the stage for our panel discussion, here is the agenda. We'll be talking about why are we talking about a future without cookies, what's being proposed, where has the market in general gone, what does this mean for the advertising ecosystem, how Kingpin sees things, and then we'll wrap it all up before we get into the panel discussion. So why are we talking about a future without cookies? While the conversation about cookies, tracking, and privacy has long been discussed, two main events happened over the last few years to accelerate the end of third-party cookies as we know them. First, in 2018, we had two pieces of legislation passed. First, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, and CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act in California. This put in high alert the industry and how they collected, used, and sold consumers' data. This was the first major step to putting privacy first and highlighted the need for data to be explicitly opted in, but didn't necessarily force that issue. Then in January 2020, Google announced that they would end support for third-party cookies starting in 2022. That move has accelerated this change. It also set in motion a scramble by marketers, technology providers, publishers, and everyone who has built a business on collecting and utilizing cookies to find alternative solutions. The target date for this move was the start of 2022, but Google made it clear that only after proposals being discussed, the needs of users, publishers, and advertisers had been addressed, and tools had been developed to mitigate the impact were they going to phase out third-party cookies. So long story short, it may be some time before cookies are completely phased out, but there's no time like the present to start looking at alternative options. And while the industry freaked out when this announcement was made, there has been some great progress to alternatives in the industry, and the industry has been hard at work. So what's being proposed? Well, let's start with Google. Soon after announcing their move to end third-party cookies, Google announced the Privacy Sandbox. This is not just one proposal or solution, it's a massive attempt to radically re-engineer how digital advertising works today. Google's two main proposals are Flock and Fledge. Flock is federated learning of cohorts, targeting based on interest groups. And Fledge, first locally executed decision over groups experiment. Yes, quite the mouthful. but all you really need to know is that flocks are for targeting and fledges for retargeting. Privacy concerns with cohorts have been surfaced, with the potential for abuse still possible. All of these options, proposals, et cetera, are being reviewed by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and GitHub. Then there are all of the other proposals that sit outside the sandbox and are focused on the open web staying open. And there are a lot of them, and there's new ones coming out every single day. The one gaining the most traction at the moment, however, is the Trade Desk Unified ID 2.0. UID replaces the standard identifier of email with encrypted and hashed email addresses. The goal is to enhance transparency and preserve privacy while still allowing some level of targeted behavioral advertising, which is obviously ideal for advertising. This has gained significant momentum and is being administered by prebid.org with some support from some of the largest ad tech companies. Questions remain as to whether individuals will opt into unified ID, and even if they do, will it reach a critical mass? And will there be the scale there to actually make it effective? Other solutions out there include LiveRamp's ATS with its authenticated traffic solution. There's ID5, which Amazon has put its support behind. There's Loademy's Panorama ID, which is fairly new in conjunction with PubMatic. It's a probabilistic solution, which means it doesn't have the same constraints of having to have authenticated users. So the scale is there, but whether or not it's effective will still be determined. So there's lots of promising alternatives in the marketplace. And all of these will be administered by the IB Tech Labs Project REARC. And finally, there's Apple. And Apple's an interesting one because they've very much pivoted towards privacy over the last year, call it. And with the release of their new iOS, they've given consumers express ability to opt out of tracking within apps as well as tracking across apps, making it more difficult to actually target mobile. So cookies have been depreciating for a while. Browsers' privacy settings and control over how browsers are being tracked on the web is nothing new. Most browsers have stopped actively tracking users for some time or giving consumers explicit control over how their data is accessed and used. Microsoft's Edge browser, for instance, takes a very active role in minding users' privacy. It gives you control over how you are tracked across the web and what browsing data Edge keeps. And then there's both Firefox and Safari, who have been blocking cookies for a while. So Firefox since 2019 and Safari since 2017, and by default since 2019. They've also been continuously updating their privacy and tracking policies to give consumers significantly more control and protections. And then there's the newer browsers like Brave and DuckDuckGo, built with privacy front and center, giving consumers total control over their data, how it's shared, and whether or not they're tracked, and eliminating fingerprinting and tactics such as that. So Google really is just the latest to make this move, albeit the largest with the largest impact on the ecosystem. So what does this mean for the ecosystem? Well, the ecosystem, as we all know, is built on cookies. Historically, there have been many intermediaries between the advertiser and the end user. And this has created unnecessary complexity and opportunity for bad actors to collect, store, and misuse data for purposes not expressly allowed by the owner of the data. So what happens now? Kingpin doesn't think there will be one magic bullet or silver bullet that will not only protect consumer privacy, but also allow advertisers to continue to serve relevant advertising to prospects in a safe, secure way. There will be a multitude of solutions that will need to be stitched together to target, activate, and measure across advertisers' media spend. We advise a crawl, walk, run approach to testing the various solutions. So in the short term, we think contextual will gain importance over the coming year. More advanced contextual solutions will be built. But in the meantime, the way replacements are grouped and found using keywords and natural language processing means segments can be very granular, but also take into account things like sentiment. In the short term, context is a proven solution that can be implemented today, and we've had great success aligning our customers' advertisements with relevant content. More of a foundational and mid to long-term strategy is definitely first-party data. And this will be critical to B2B marketers in the future. It's important to have a strategy before going down the route of just collecting data. Simply collecting that data without a roadmap will not yield the desired results. Additionally, there needs to be value exchange between individuals giving companies their data and something in return. And so we feel like content becomes even more critical as more people will be asked to supply their information. Finally, using a platform to organize, map, and segment customer data will be critical for driving the best long-term ROI. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach, but the sooner you start, the more data you will have access to. And finally, the replacement solutions. These are still being developed and very much a work in progress. What solutions, alternatives, et cetera, rise to the top is still being worked on. In the short term, testing new solutions in conjunction with contextual and first party is our recommended strategy. Doing your research to understand how each of these solutions will impact your business will also be critical, and where Kingpin can offer value by giving our point of view on these various alternatives. So to just wrap things up before we get into our panel discussion, contextual is a great jumping off point to prepare for a cookieless future. First-party data will grow in importance. Don't wait, start researching solutions for collecting, segmenting, and organizing your first-party data. Don't get stuck with just one solution. Test and learn as you go along. Look at a variety of solutions to get the best results from your media dollars. And finally, get started now. January 2022 is right around the corner. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And if the panelists would turn on their screens and also turn on their audio. Harish, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Just waiting for Haley and Andre.
Matt, it says I can't start the video because the host has paused it. So you may have to start my video for me.
Same with me on my side.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Still waiting for mine.
Apologies for the delay here.
There we go.
There we go.
Hi.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. All right, we got it. So welcome, panelists. Before I let you introduce yourselves, just a couple of housekeeping items. First, please use the Q&A and use that for asking questions. I'll try to get to as many questions during the course of our discussion as I can. Use the chat function to chat amongst yourselves. Raise your hand if you need assistance. Also, there will be a couple of poll questions that will be asked during the course of the discussion, so please interact with those as they come up. First off, I'll let Haley introduce herself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Hunter. I'm an account manager at Google. Been at Google for almost 3 years now. Been in the digital marketing space for a little over 5. But what I do at Google is essentially I work with, like Matt said, over 50 clients a quarter to help them grow their digital advertising across all of our Google properties. So I work with everything from search, display, YouTube, all of it. My team personally is not verticalized, so I work with clients with a variety of marketing objectives, but the majority of my clients are in the B2B and lead gen space. So thank you so much for having me today, and I'm really excited to be involved in this important conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Haley. Now let's go with Harish.
Hello, everyone. I'm Harish Munagala with Quest Software. A brief background of Quest Software. We were founded in 1987, and since then we have been providing software solutions for enterprise IT environments, whether it's managing and monitoring databases and or taking control of hybrid environments or security solutions for the enterprise IT. Quest Software does it all. And my role is I'm the director of marketing operations and analytics. So supporting our different business units with and our marketing teams with marketing technology solutions, as well as relevant analytics and insights is the role of my team and myself here. And I'm excited to join this panel discussion today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harish. And finally, Andre.
Great. I'm the founder and CEO of Triblio, and Triblio is actually part of IDG, International Data Group, and I serve as the Chief Product Officer for IDG as well, so I have a sort of dual role. Triblio, if you're not familiar with Triblio, we're a leading account-based marketing platform. We enable marketers to execute end-to-end ABM programs. And we do have a component of our platform that does, what we call account-based ads, so you can execute account-based advertising. And so this whole topic of, third-party cookies going away is of great interest to us, and so we've been tracking it for a while. And I'm glad to be part of the conversation here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Andre, and thank you to all the panelists for your time today. I'm really excited about the conversation. So as we get into it, the first question, and this is actually for all of the panelists, will there be one solution to unify them all? I know that sounds very much like the Lord of the Rings, but will there be one solution to unify them all? And will there be a true cookie replacement? To start, I'll go to you, Harish, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think the solutions are still evolving, right? And as we look at the alternatives or cookies, I don't know if there is a true replacement or a solution that can completely replace the cookie. But as you have mentioned in your notes, there are several initiatives that are underway that are trying to solve this problem and kind of flipping the enterprise data architectures on its head and putting first-party data at the core of it is, at a very high level seems to be the solution. But getting there, I think it's going to take quite some time, because over more than 10 years, several solutions have been built more predominantly on the advertising programmatic side of things, which are based on third party, whether we talk about, omni-channel, cross-channel advertising and retargeting, everything is kind of built around third party. So it's a major re-architecture that needs to happen. And I don't know if there is an exact like-to-like replacement from what I am seeing today yet.
Got it. Well, I'll go to you next, Andre.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, to answer your question, no, I don't think there's a silver bullet where there's just going to be one solution. I think marketers, advertisers are going to have to piece things together. But, while we're talking about cookies going away and everyone talks about that, we need to probably, just a gentle reminder, we're talking about third-party cookies going away, right? And first-party cookies continue to be alive and well. And I think that still gives us a lot of options as advertisers that we can leverage. Certainly the first thing for marketers is cultivate your own first-party cookie pool. That's I think something we can talk about later, or certainly something you should be doing. But I think the other option out there is advertising on platforms with sizable and relevant first-party audiences. And what I mean by that is really there are two kinds of platforms I think that are interesting. One is social media networks with authenticated audiences, and you can think of LinkedIn and Facebook as examples of those. And certainly the other is sort of premium media networks with multiple on-site publications. In the B2C world, you might think of something like Condé Nast, like they have Wired, New Yorker, Bon Appetit, and a host of other brands are all under their sort of network. And that's an example in the B2C world. In the B2B IT world, it would be IDG is an example of that with CIO, CSO, Computer World, Network World, and others. So I think looking at these sort of networks of first-party audiences, these outlets have a lot of relevance and also gives some degree of scale. And I think they're good options to explore.
So kind of as a follow-up question to Andre, obviously IDG has quite a few brands underneath the IDG umbrella. You talk about Condé Nast, who obviously has incredible scale. What do you think the future holds for smaller publishers who maybe don't have the scale of like an IDG, and how do they compete in a world where first-party data and authenticated users may be the currency that they need to operate in?
Well, I think when you don't have scale, right? Certainly, some of the initiatives like the UID, user ID 2.0, which are all essentially authenticated user options. That's very appealing. But I think something that you're going to see is that there may be more sort of this idea of co-ops or affiliate networks that sort of join in. For instance, IDG, not speaking on behalf of IDG per se, but like, you may find, like, say, I'll use Condé Nast as an example. They may have their own and operated sites, but they may also have a partner, so like affiliate partner, so they can sort of possibly create create options for smaller publishers to join in. I see that as a possibility.
Okay.
As someone said earlier, it's evolving in real time, so we'll see what happens.
For sure. Haley, same question to you.
Yeah, I think similarly to what everyone was saying, the short answer is no. There's not going to be a replacement for cookies, and on Google's side, that's intentional. We want to kind of shift our focus to being user first and privacy first. So we've seen like 81% of users are saying that they're becoming more concerned with how companies are using their data. And that's a really impactful number. So what we're doing is shifting from how the industry originally was to put our users first. We are focused on still sustaining solutions that will allow for a free and open and ad-funded web, but with our users at the forefront. So leveraging opportunities like first-party data, which is what Andre was saying, really leaning into automation and machine learning, and then our new technologies as well around Privacy Sandbox, which we're putting a lot of effort into, and we're really excited for those to come to fruition. In terms of unifying them all, we are working really closely with the W3C to integrate a bunch of feedback to make sure that these solutions are sustainable for the future and are also going to apply to all of our advertisers and publishers' needs as well.
I guess as a follow-up, and not to put you on the spot, but I mean, obviously, I think stitching together like several solutions will probably be the path forward. I mean, I guess then do you sort of get into a scenario and like where we've got Blu-ray and DVD, right? It's like you've got these different like competing standards that try to sort of get off the ground, and yet only one sort of ends up sort of shaking out. Do you see over time like sort of one solution becoming the de facto standard? Or does this just make the ecosystem more complex? I mean, it's already complex enough. I showed that screen about the display, all the intermediaries, right? It's already extremely complex. So where does this sort of leave the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. To be honest, I personally don't know. To be transparent, I think, like you said, it's going to consistently change, and we're working cohesively with our partners and developers to really understand like what their needs are with all of this. And I think a lot of the changes that we've done previously in terms of browsers have been adopted by other partners like Safari. So I think there is like a definitely a positive future for how this can be worked into the entire ecosystem, like you were saying. But in terms of what that looks like hard and fast, I don't really have an answer for that just yet.
Totally makes sense. So at this point, we're going to get our first poll question that will pop up, and it's: have you started testing replacement alternatives to cookies yet? And it's either yes, and we're really on top of it; B, started, found a solution but struggling to activate; C, started but struggling to find a solution; or not started at all. So if you all would just sort of chime in we'd love to kind of see where the audience is at the moment. I'll just leave that up for 30 seconds here. Get some answers in. A lot of not started. We have 6 months, everybody. All right. Yeah, a few more here. Okay, so overwhelmingly, 63% of the audience has not started. 25% has started but struggling to find a solution. 6% have found a solution but struggling to activate, and only 3 people total, 6% have actually are really on top of it. I guess for the panelists, and I'll go to you, Andre. Does that surprise you, or are you like, yep, that's kind of what we're seeing too?
Well, I'm just happy for the 6% that have it all together. Yeah. I mean, they're very confident, so that's great. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me because, you know, marketers tend to live in the moment, you know, like it's not yet a crisis. And I don't think many of us in the industry believe that, like on January 1, 2022, Google's going to shut everything down, right? Like, so, you know, I think everyone's still watching. I mean, we really believe that we would be all, you know, we would be like really panicking right now. So you know, I don't know if there's a timeline per se, but I think most people doubt that it'll just get turned off in January or early 2022. So yeah, I think it's not very surprising that most folks haven't found a solution or haven't even gotten started yet. So,
Harish, what about Quest? Where you guys fit in with that poll? Sorry.
Yeah. Before I get into that, I want to confirm that the 3 people who voted yes are not the panelists here. We did not get a chance to vote. So I would say, you know, we have started looking into the solutions, whether it's looking into the architecture based on first party, and, you know, as a marketing operations group, you know, we have started looking into some data points around what happened when some of the other browsers have already stopped, you know, supporting third party. And so kind of getting all the data points together and analytics together to potentially scope out the level of impact is something that you know, that we have started. And also as an organization, really closely looking at, you know, what are all our third party dependent cookie dependencies and what are our first party, and what is the potential solution. I would say, you know, started looking into the solutions. Again, you know, that stitching together is the difficult part, right? Because, you know, for one part of the problem we have, okay, CDP may be a solution, and then, you know, for your advertising programs itself, there are other options like, you know, contextual targeting and all that we're talking about. But I would say, you know, in very early stages, and definitely looking for multiple solutions at this time.
Sure. So Haley, sort of a follow-up question for you, and it sort of goes to cohorts and how they will work in a B2B environment, and like how granular will businesses be able to get with cohorts, and how much, I guess, you know, sort of testing has gone around, you know, testing in B2B environments.
Yeah. So obviously we want the solution to be applicable to every kind of industry. So that's just one piece. I think in terms of, you know, how it works with B2B, I think what B2B definitely has maybe an upper hand on is that rich first party data that you guys can leverage. So that's definitely something that we're, you know, highly suggesting that we lean into. In terms of, you know, the granularity piece behind that, in terms of like how the actual APIs are going to actually look and come to fruition, like I said, so I don't have like a ton of insight on that, especially from like the account manager side. But I think it's going to be kind of like a mindset shift here. So as of now, we are using one technology, cookies, to be applied to a bunch of different use cases. Whereas like moving into the future, what we're going to be shifting to is having many purpose-built APIs that are going to allow for individual use cases to be adjusted over time as needed. So I think there is going to be quite a layer of granularity that we can kind of pull in and leverage as, from the marketer side. I think, in terms of like timeline and like everyone was saying, like we don't want any surprises here. Like we want you guys to be just as involved in this as we are. It's a really interesting product cycle, especially on my side, because, usually we have our product and eng teams that, create this product, they're testing it on the back end, and then we announce and launch it. Whereas now we've announced it, and now we're working through the kinks and we're testing it with a bunch of people and like a bunch of visibility. And then we're eventually going to launch it. So it's kind of flipped on its head in terms of how we're approaching it. But I think, B2B is definitely in a good space to leverage that first party rich data that, you as a business are the only ones that own. So definitely some exciting things coming out from the B2B space.
And sort of a follow-up question, and this is actually from the audience, and I'll kind of group these together, but they're curious about how first-party data will be applied to like programmatic in the future via Google. So I'm curious to kind of hear if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, programmatic, we're same thing, like really leaning into first party. I think that's been kind of the general messaging that we've been putting out. I think what we're trying to really leverage is the fact that, from the publisher and marketer side, that this is going to be, the next coming thing. Like Andre said, like first party is not going away. So let's continue to like build up the audience list that we have on our side and leverage those from a programmatic piece. We're still doing a lot of testing on the programmatic side. So there should be, more comms coming out that are going to be a bit more crisp and clear. But that would be my recommendation there.
Okay. Got it. Andre, to you, so I mean, in terms of B2B marketers, are they going to be able to get the same scale and reach? And will it be sort of solution dependent? I mean, will there be like, you'll use Flock, for instance, for scale and, unified ID for more precision, for instance? Do you see them, sort of different, as Haley mentioned, different use cases for different situations based on the KPIs that you need to hit for each marketing, tactic?
So I think that in general, if you be objective about it, I would say you're not going to be able to get the same scale. And I don't know how much you want to get into it, but if you think about today, most authenticated traffic is about 10% of all traffic. And I understand the efforts of the user ID 2.0, unique ID 2.0, and other initiatives that are like those. Let's say it even, goes up by 50%. So it's 15% of the traffic. It's still a very small percentage, right? So, I think reach, scale of reach is going to be the issue. Now, how do you get that? Now, just because you can't get the same scale doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? I mean, if you are exchanging less scale for more accurate targeting, that's a good exchange, right? And so I think I would just suggest marketers think differently about this. And back to my original point about like, that's why I think exploring these first party audience platforms are important. You can get to these, like, let's say if you're selling into IT, the IT buyer, if you advertise on IDG as a self-serving example, but if you advertise there, you're going to get very targeted audience. You might not get the same scale in terms of pure impressions, but whatever impressions you have are exactly the kind of audience that you want to be after, right? So I think that's one piece. And then I would say, just in general, some of these, I love the work that Google is doing and with Flock, but Flock is not an account-based marketing approach. So there are going to be some types of B2B advertising programs that those technologies won't apply to, and because it's not account-based, it's based on an interest cohort essentially.
And Harish, I mean, for your perspective, are you concerned about these changes, and how effective do you think these solutions will be in a B2B environment?
Yeah, definitely, there are a lot of unknowns here, right? I mean, clearly, directionally, we know that, our return on our ad spend or cost per click, cost per conversion, and all those are going to get impacted. And, our reporting infrastructure, that is going to get impacted. We know that. And the limited options we are seeing as alternatives, whether it's, contextual targeting or, any of these networks with first party, everyone has the same alternative, right? So those avenues are going to, get all the traffic, and then, that means a lot higher cost per clicks and ad spend, all that. So definitely, there are concerns around, how this is going to shape up and how things are going to look like. And, again, if you're talking about some of the conversion tracking pixels that are going to get impacted with cookies and all that, that also means maybe we have to run a lot of advertising campaigns, not necessarily knowing whether someone has actually engaged or not, right? So that means we may have to repeatedly probably target the same buyers and audiences without having a strong infrastructure or architecture to track the response and all that. So yeah, there are a lot of concerns, and some of these solutions, I think even if come Jan 2022, even if we have some of these solutions in place, I think there will be a lot of learning curve and adoption. And even if UID is implemented, just to get to a point where we have significant amount of people that we are able to tag with UIDs, that's going to take some time. So in short term, we are probably going to see a lot more impact. So I would say it's going to take a bit of a learning curve for everyone to catch up to the new technologies and alternatives that are available.
Sure. So sort of a follow-up question from Justin in the audience. And, again, I think this is specifically, I mean, if users are most concerned about privacy, and I would argue that maybe, especially in a B2B environment, users being, let's say IT people, for instance, that if there is a value exchange, they are not so concerned. If they're willing to give their information for a valuable piece of content, they're not as concerned about the privacy. But, if users are most concerned about privacy and what companies are doing with their data, how is moving towards first-party cookies the solution? So I don't know if you have a perspective on that.
I think it's a step towards, better managing consent and taking users getting a better control, because when it's first party, at least what you're signing up for, right? Third party, you're not in control. So that way I see a lot of value in moving towards first party focused architecture of this solution.
I don't know, Haley, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we have products that are really focused on consent, like Harish was saying. Like we have consent mode that allows for Google conversion tracking, as well as audience lists that we're coming out with. So I think very similarly, it's just kind of making the users feel like they have, or I guess give them the control that they want. So giving them the opportunity to give you consented data is really where we see the future. It impacts obviously the users, but it also impacts marketers in terms of the fact that they're losing out on some business because users don't feel comfortable engaging with their platform, or against giving them a certain amount of insight into like who this individual user is. So we're really just focused on making a sustainable future for marketers, publishers, and users.
Understood. So I'm going to just put a pin in that for 1 second, and now it's time for our second poll question. So if that would be put up, that would be fantastic. So the second poll question is, are you planning to add a CDP or DMP to your tech stack in the near future? Answers are coming in. Looking pretty equally split. Give it just a few more seconds here. All right. So 42% have not considered a CDP or DMP. 23% considering but not started looking. About 26% have researched and investigating, and 10%, maybe the same three that are fully on board with the because it's three again. 3 have actually are in the process of onboarding. Probably the same 3 who have got it all figured out with the replacement solutions as well. But I guess, and this is sort of a follow-up question from this for you, Andre, given Triblio being an Abm platform, and I know you do have some CDP capabilities as well, but like, how does like a CDP, I guess, dovetail into like a target account list and ABM and using your own first-party data for doing account-based marketing, or is there a correlation between the two? You're on.
Yep. Let's see. So you're asking, how does CDP fit in with an ABM platform?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I think capturing first-party data so that and fully consented data to be able to execute on your ABM programs is vitally important, right? And I know that a lot of the attention has been around programmatic, but in fact, the reality may be that capturing your own first-party data is really not about programmatic as much as it's that you have now this fully consented database that you can act on, and that could mean using email, using direct mail and all that. So from ABM perspective, it's important to understand, just speaking to that just briefly, I know that's not the focus of this webinar, but for those that are interested, like for ABM perspective, ABM at the heart of it isn't about programmatic advertising. It's just one of the ways you surround and reach your target buyer, right? And or your buying group. We're going to lead, a good ABM platform is really about orchestrating multi-channel touches for your buying group, and that's essentially what we're doing with our platform.
I guess as a follow-up, and we sort of had this conversation before, and I know you didn't necessarily have an answer, but it's sort of a hypothetical, but like, what does happen to ABM in a cookieless world? Obviously, I know programmatic is just one piece of that, but without, in the absence of cookies, that piece of the puzzle, the programmatic piece, becomes much more difficult to do, right? So I guess, like, what happens?
Yeah, so without once again sounding too self-serving, I mean, we merged with IDG last year, about this time last year. And one of the reasons we did that was, obviously, it was a financially, good outcome for us. But the other reason was because we saw on the horizon this challenge of doing ABM without first-party data, right? And we said, IDG has first-party data. We need to connect with, with a supplier of first-party data. I think that when you look at ABM, what I can speak to what we're doing, maybe rather than all the other players on the market, because I think there are issues running ads. Most ABM platforms today use programmatic as the primary way to reach the target buyer. All of you that do ABM know that. What we're doing for the future is we're actually giving you more advertising options, right? So meaning this, you can use a mix of, you can advertise on social. You can also, we will be bringing in the capability for you to do contextual advertising, keyword advertising, as well as using IP-based advertising as well, a hybrid of first-party and IP-based advertising. And then on top of that, we're also going to, and this is exclusive to us, is we'll make available those inventory from the IDG and its affiliate network to our users, right? So The long and short of it is that I think the future is giving the ABM practitioner more options, because as we said earlier, all of us said the same thing. There's no single silver bullet. So what's the next best thing is make it easy for the marketer to advertise through different channels and then tying it all together. So that's essentially our approach for the future.
Awesome, thank you. And Haley, this is sort of a question tying into that. And, you know, I sort of mentioned at the bottom of, you know, my piece and sort of setting the stage that contextual is a quick win. And I guess, where do you see the future of contextual going? And what sort of, is there on the sort of roadmap for Google to build out more robust contextual, I guess, solutions within the platform?
Yeah, so I think that the future of contextual targeting is going to be around our Flock solution. So you did a great job of kind of explaining like high level, but essentially, you know, it's an enabling privacy preserving technologies to support interest-based ads. So how it works is the browser will create large groups of people or cohorts and with similar browsing interests and assign them what we call a cohort ID. So no individual identifiers will be basically viewable for the marketer. And then based on this, you know, large group of observations, that we can use that as our contextual targeting piece. Why is this privacy safe? Is because their privacy is attained through that Flock ID. So nothing related to, you know, personal identifiers will be shared. And it's all about, you know, aggregation, anonymization, and on-device processes to make sure that that's going to be privacy safe and be sustainable and also scalable. So those are kind of like the main pieces that we have for Flock that are going to be kind of our take on contextual targeting in the future.
And I guess as a sort of next step, when, you know, we talked about Fledge, like how does that play with Flock in terms of remarketing to those cohorts or those interest groups? And again, I guess, you know, if you have any insight into how that works in like in the B2B environment and how granular we can get. I mean, I know we obviously, you know, cohorts for a auto enthusiast makes sense, right? But someone who's, you know, interested in cloud SaaS security, for instance, is a different person altogether. So I guess, you know, how granular you can get and how can you re-engage those people?
Yeah, so Fledge is basically our focus is to re-engage users based on actions that they're doing across websites or through brand interaction. So the three steps of this one is an advertiser signals to a browser when to add a user to what we call a site defined list. The seller then, so the seller of an ad slot then runs like an on-device auction and decides which buyers can participate. And then the final piece is the advertiser decides whether to participate in the auction and decides like an ad auction and a bid price there using a trusted server, which is defined by compliance with principles and policies established in the standard process. And then we allow for real-time information through that trusted server. So, you know, how much budget is left, the campaign bids, you know, overall campaign budget, things like that. So essentially, like the expression of interest is stored locally on the user's device, and that's what makes it privacy safe. So websites and their associated networks can't learn about the visitor's advertising interests, and owners of the remarketing list can't really understand what websites they've been to, excuse me, across the server. So it does give access to real-time bidding and information in a privacy safe way.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that, Haley. I'm just going to pause and say you've probably all received a feedback form. Please complete it if you can. It's about the content of the webinar, about the speakers, what you'd like to see from us in the future. And for every completed form, Kingpin will donate $5 to Equality Now, which is a charity form to champion and protect equal rights for women and girls across the world. So a fantastic charity. So fill out your forms and we will donate to that. So thank you. So just please, as you see that, fill it out. Okay. moving along, I know we're getting close to time here, so I'll ask a couple more questions. And Harish, this is kind of to you. Obviously, as Quest is thinking about like what comes next and how you move forward, are you thinking about a CDP, a DMP, and if not, like how else would you go about collecting and organizing Quest first-party data for for internal purposes, for whether it's ABM or for advertising in general?
Yeah, I would say CDP and DMP are definitely in the mix of options that we are considering. And when we talk about CDP, I want to make a key distinction around getting a CDP solution off the shelf. That is, typically where the understanding is when we talk about CDPs. But several B2B large-scale organizations already have a very robust internal data architectures where, across departments, they at least have been hearing this term of, customer 360, or, the 360 view of, every activity that a customer does. So there are several large-scale B2B organizations that have started, and many of them have created a very strong and robust architecture, which is internally homegrown based on their own data warehouses and data marts and all that. And for all that we know, a CDP may be an enhancement to that sort of internal architecture and include some of these use cases that we are talking about here. So CDP and DMP is very well in the mix, and build by partner, or take something that's already in-house and kind of extend. All those options are on the table, I would say.
Great. So, and I think Pete is going to put up a how we're doing here for our yeah, there we go. So he's putting up how we're doing. Keep filling out those that feedback form so we can donate more money to Equality Now. But this question is for everyone. But what is the short-term or long-term impact this will have on marketing dollars and or results? Do you see? And Haley, I guess obviously from a advertising perspective in 2022, as this comes about, do you see people pulling back on their advertising? What do you think will happen with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to approach it kind of with first off with the lens of like, this is not the first time that we've seen a major change in the ecosystem. If you think back to when we moved from desktop to mobile and app, like there were obviously some growing pains there. So I'm going to level with everyone. Like, we do expect growing pains as we make this shift. Things related to transparency in terms of conversion tracking and obviously tracking against from an audience perspective. I think that we are trying to create solutions that will be sustainable. In terms of like short-term growing pains, like I do see that potentially being some kind of issue. But like I said, we are working really, really cohesively with our partners to input feedback and get ready for when cookies actually get depreciated. In terms of long-term impacts, like this is it's a really exciting space to be in, just because we're trying to make this a sustainable thing for the future, and really, like I said, working really cohesively with the feedback that we're getting from our developers and publishers. And there will be origin trials and things coming out where other people can participate in some of these experiments to really continue to change and iterate and make it effective for the future.
Great. And Andre, same question for you. I mean, obviously you're working directly with clients. I mean, do you see them pulling back on their spends in next year, or do you think they'll continue to invest in the same way they have?
I fully expect clients to invest in the same way, because I think the reason so much money is spent on programmatic is that marketers have this need to reach their prospects, right? I mean, that need doesn't go away. So, and I know that email isn't the complete answer for that. So so I think they're still going to look to advertising, and I think that the future is going to be a mix of different. The spend is going to get spread out over different channels, so some on social networks like LinkedIn, some with first-party media platforms like IDG, or and some with Contextual, or some hybrid type of IP targeting approach. So I think that's what you're going to see. I think the same amount of spend, just spread in sort of different across different sort of outlets.
Gotcha. So we're just about at time here, and I'm going to ask for just each of you to kind of give a final thought, one takeaway perhaps for the listeners, and I'll start with you, Haley.
Yeah, I know you said one thought, but I have like 3 bullets.
That's all right.
Yeah. So the first one is really just to commit to building, really solid relationships with your customers, and leaning into aggregating first party data. And as we mentioned, sooner the better. Second piece is leaning into automation and machine learning, as well as, conversion modeling and things like that, to help kind of move from a more precision focused to more predictive focused future. And then finally, just commit to new technologies that are privacy safe. So really leaning into the Privacy Safe Sandbox, subscribe to our Google blogs and keep up to date with all the new things coming.
Great. Harish?
Yeah, I would say it's important to, stay updated and get an understanding of what is changing and the scope of, impact across all the different programs. And I think it's time to definitely, for several of us who are here who have not really looked into potential alternatives or solutions, I think this is high time we get started on that, and looking at the first party based solutions, and then really planning out the alternatives, and then making sure that we are prepared for 2022 is I would say it's high time we do that. I think that's a key takeaway.
Great. And Andre?
Yeah, very quickly, I would say, like everyone else has said, keep educated. But the other thing I would say is also kind of don't hold on to the past. Like, it's time to start looking and exploring new options. So the sooner you get on with that and learn what it's like to try and use these new options, the better off you are. So I'll just leave it at that. So
awesome. Well, thank you to the panelists, Andre, Haley, Harish. It was a really interesting conversation. I appreciate your time today. Thank you to everyone who listened and asked questions. I really appreciate it, and contributed the feedback for Equality Now. And this recording will be available, and we'll send it around to everyone who registered as an on-demand webinar as well. So you can watch it later or share it with colleagues. So again, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks all.